We are excited to have Dayna Altman, 2010 graduate of Algonquin Regional High School, to speak with us today. Dayna graduated from Northeastern with a bachelor's in human services in 2015, and then returned to the university to get her master's degree in public health in 2018. She has spoken to psychology and women in U.S. classes for several years now about her struggles with mental health. Today, she is here to discuss the cookbook she has written to help people cope with anxiety, depression, and other mental health disorders. Altman's book, Bake It Till You Make It, features recipes and stories from more than 40 people who have overcome personal hardships, including mental health struggles, physical injury, and personal loss. Each contributor shares one story along with one baking recipe. The stories in Altman's book illustrate the different ways people can heal. In Dayna's words, everyone has a story to share. Bringing together stories from so many different people can help you realize you're not alone. So let's give a big welcome to Dayna Altman.
Thank you. Okay, thank you so much. Am I good, mic-wise? Okay, awesome. So thank you for the introduction. I'm glad that you did that. I can kind of cross some things off my list and what I was gonna say. So again, I'm Dayna Altman. It's so cool to be back here. Almost 10 years since I graduated, which is beyond me. As Mr. Godbout had said, so I wrote this book, Bake It Till You Make It, and I've had the opportunity to come back year after year to talk to different classes about my own struggle. This year, I think I've tested a lot of different formats throughout the years and getting to share. I'm now doing this thing called Bake It Till You Make It Live, which I just started, so you're one of the first audiences to see it, where I tell my story while cooking. This is a very simple recipe, so bear with me. And I will definitely try and leave a room at the end for questions. Okay, so this is a recipe for graham cracker brownies. The first step would be to preheat the oven. Obviously, we don't have an oven today, but this is a great way to start. As we think about preheating the oven, that's usually the environment that the baked good is cooked in, so I'll start by talking about my environment. So I'm 27 now. I grew up in Southborough my whole life. My parents still live here. And although I'm so grateful for the rich opportunities that come with going to a school like Algonquin and growing up in an affluent town like Southborough, I think the perfection tendencies and the opportunities really brought a lot of pressure and stress on me. I've always been a perfectionist. My parents tell me stories about how in first grade I would cry over spelling tests. In seventh grade I had a college board account. So I definitely think that my anxiety started very early on. I kind of coped with it through my own rituals that I didn't even know at the time were strategies. But things really changed for me when I went to college. So as Mr. Godbout said, I graduated in 2010, and I started at Providence College, which is a school in Rhode Island. And Providence was a really great fit for me in the beginning. I started a little bit early. I had the opportunity to go through a program where I would move in early and do community service. And I made some great friends during that process. Such great friends that within the first week of school, when I started having panic attacks so badly that I couldn't go to class, they were able to take me to the counseling center right away. I'd never seen a therapist before. I was kind of just using my own kind of unhealthy, I guess, coping mechanisms on my own. So going into therapy and learning very quickly that I had generalized anxiety disorder and also depression was something surprising to me. I had never knew that what I was experiencing had a title or words to it. So that was really important. And I felt as though my life started to crumble at that point. I didn't know what to expect in therapy. I think that's something that I hear from a lot of people. People don't know what that's going to be like. And starting medication too, it was a really confusing time for me. And I felt like things were crumbling, so I'm gonna start with the graham cracker crumbs here. Lots of cool analogies. So I'm gonna pour these in. So through this experience and this process, I started restricting my food. I had been a dancer my whole life, and I also grew up in a family that was very food focused. So being concerned about my body was something that I certainly wasn't a stranger to. But having this intense anxiety, and then going into these moments of feeling really sad and depressed, it definitely affected my appetite. Really quickly, I lost a lot of weight, and while this has been something that I had struggled with internally, it had never really shown in my body before. And I got some great feedback, which is really telling of the complicated relationship that we have with dieting in this society, that I was struggling so much that it was showing on my body, and people were congratulating me for it. So of course that, or not of course, but for me, that very clearly led to a full-blown eating disorder. So it was at the end of my freshman year, so this is the crumbling part. It was at the end of my freshman year that I decided to go to treatment over the summer. This is something that's not very normal. Usually when people go to mental health treatment, it's not a choice. It's something that people are usually, I wouldn't say forced into, but other people make that decision for them. But for me, I was in a place where I could ask for it, so I felt like that was a really good time for me to take some time for myself. So I decided that I wanted to go to a residential treatment program, and that meant that I would be spending time at the program both in the evenings and then on the weekends. But unfortunately, there's such a conundrum in our mental health system and in our society that there's so much need for people that really only the beds and space goes to those who are medically compromised, and that wasn't me at the time. So I ended up in a partial program, which meant that I went to treatment every day during the week, so like Monday through Friday. And while I thought I was really ready for treatment at that point, I don't think that was the case. I thought that it would be something that would be easy, kind of like just going to therapy, taking medication would be very ritualistic, but instead it was forcing me to really take a look at what I was dealing with that caused me to be restricting my food, to be having these panic attacks. I don't think I was really ready for it. It was also in this treatment program that I met other people who were struggling and without using food as a coping skill or mechanism, and they introduced me to some self-harm techniques. And now self-harm for me never felt like it was really what I needed, but I was in just so much pain and anguish that I would try anything until after I left that treatment program, I started seeing a new therapist, because before then, I had just seen a therapist on campus, so I needed to find someone in my community, and I did, and I'm so grateful for her. This isn't someone I see regularly anymore, but I do get a chance to see her when I'm back in Southborough, and she really changed things for me. I felt so comfortable opening up to her. It was such a great fit, and because of that relationship, I finally felt like I could tell her my big secret, something that I was holding in this entire time. And that's that I was having really intense suicidal ideations, that I just didn't want to be here anymore. And while this is something that I think I had thought of before, whether it was maybe in high school, just like a fleeting thought, or during my freshman year, at this point it felt so overwhelming that I didn't really know what to do with those thoughts. And she brought me to a treatment program at McLean Hospital, which is a psychiatric hospital in Belmont. It's very well known. And I loved it. So I was on this unit that was for adolescents. I was 18 at the time, so I was definitely the oldest person there, but that really made me a leader on the unit. I felt like I was being heard for the first time. I was learning coping skills. And when I left, I felt totally prepared and ready to go back to Providence my sophomore year. And while that did kind of sustain for a little while, I quickly recognized, although I was going to therapy and still taking the medication that I had beforehand, I wasn't really addressing things the way I had learned over the summer. I kind of was in this notion that I had spent the whole summer trying to cure myself, and that this mental health thing was like a one and done fight, and I'd fought it, it was over, so I was suppressing a lot, to the point where right before Christmas vacation, I had told my therapist at school that I was thinking about going back to treatment because of the experience that I had at McLean was so positive. So she got me an intake appointment where they would figure out what type of treatment would be good for me. And it was over that weekend that I not only felt these really intense suicidal ideations, but now I also had a plan. And I shared that with the person who did my intake, and she very quickly sent me to an inpatient psychiatric unit, which was very different from the experience that I had over the summer. I had turned 19, so I was with all adults, and I was the youngest person by like 20 years. And I felt very just alone, misunderstood. It didn't feel like the right place for me. For those in that type of setting, it's really important because it ensures safety, but I didn't feel like it was really what I needed. So I went through the program, went through the process, but nothing had really changed. In a way, I only felt worse because I tried to get help, and it really failed me, I guess, a little bit in the system. So I went back to school that January after break, and I can remember so vividly walking into this class. So at PC, everyone takes a Development of Western Civilization class. So it's a large class at the school, so they have like smaller breakout sessions. And so I went into the class. I saw that I had failed a test, and education, as I kind of alluded to before, was so important to me growing up. So when I saw that, I felt like this was the end. And I remember going into the bathroom. The class was in the dining hall for whatever reason, like this small breakout session, and just like looking in the mirror and thinking, I don't think that I want to die, but I also don't want to feel this way anymore. And I'm really glad that I had the foresight to then call my parents and go home. And then I ended up taking a medical leave for the semester. This was so hard for me because I felt like I had always followed the path. I think as students at Algonquin, you probably feel similarly. I know everyone I graduated with, I felt, went to college, and I was seeing on social media, it was just Facebook at the time, but on Facebook, people kind of going to these formal dances and posting about their grades, and I couldn't relate at all. I was on the couch every day, really depressed. I'm really lucky that I rediscovered dance. I started going to the Boston Ballet school to just practice my dance after taking a break from high school to this point, and that really helped. I felt like having some structure was really important, and now I know that for me in the future, structure is really huge. But then in March, I got off the waiting list back at McLean at a new unit called the Hill Center. This was for women who struggled with anxiety and depression. And this is really where I always say is my turning point, because this is where I met my case manager at the time, so the person who managed my stay at the hospital, but she's now been my therapist for almost 8 years. And that relationship really changed things for me. I think what changed, and I got this question a lot, like, why was this connection so important? I think that not only was I put on the right medication, and I felt that the coping skills I was learning in this setting were really helpful, I also felt like my therapist, her name is Dayna, which is funny because it's so close to my name. I really felt like Dayna saw me and understood me and had this unwavering belief in me that I didn't feel like I had from anyone else. And it was because of that relationship that I felt really strong enough to decide to transfer schools. While Providence was a great experience for me and I made some great friends, I didn't feel like I could ever walk back on campus and feel differently or not have those memories of really when things were falling apart. So I applied and transferred to Northeastern, which was a great fit. And for that reason, so evaporated milk, I hope this isn't frozen, is like something really sweet. So I figured I would use this and add it to the graham cracker crumbs. Well, okay, it's not, thank goodness. While I talked about this turning point in my life. So Northeastern was a great fit. I felt like I was really using my story. After my first experience in treatment, my sister and I created a nonprofit organization called the Beautiful Project, which doesn't really exist anymore, but it was kind of my first step into advocacy. So the Beautiful Project was an organization where we sold bracelets and gave the proceeds to the National Eating Disorders Association. And we also had a YouTube channel where we talked about body image and the beauty standards that we think are correct in our society. And when I got to Northeastern, I was telling people about it. I started speaking there, talking about my story, and really engaging in my advocacy. So that was really huge. I got to a point where things felt good. I was seeing Dayna often. I was taking like the medication that I was supposed to be taking, practicing the coping skills. So during my 4th year, it's at Northeastern, because most students at Northeastern do 5 years. So during my 4th year, I decided to go back to something that was a goal for me before any of this happened, before I even knew what anxiety and depression were, before I had changed my major to go into social work to hopefully help people the way I was being helped at McLean and in therapy. And that was to study abroad. That was really important to me. I'm not really sure why. I had never left the country before this time, but it was really important to me to study abroad. So I'm Jewish, and Birthright is an opportunity that all young adults who are Jewish have. It's a free trip to Israel for 10 days. And I think that while most people have really positive, life-changing experiences on Birthright, for me it was a very negative, life-changing experience. I was unfortunately sexually assaulted by someone that I was traveling with. And when I got back to the US, I felt like everything I had just worked on fell apart. I felt like everything I was once using to cope with things just didn't matter anymore. And I'm really lucky because I still had Dayna in my life, and I still do. And she was able to really help me work through this experience. And it was through therapy and thinking about trauma and how to really help myself go through this experience, but also advocacy was a huge piece of what helped me heal. So like the Beautiful Project, I started a second organization called Erasing Excuses, where I would go around Boston and I would give people a whiteboard where they would write an excuse that we give perpetrators of sexual violence in our society, and then they would erase it and write a rebuttal statement. And it was through this organization that I also created a fashion show at Northeastern where we got all this donated clothing from students and teachers, and we had the opportunity to have models walk it down the runway, and then donated all the clothes to different rape crisis shelters around the city. So that was really important to me. Finding a way to use my story has always been what has helped me heal, and I think I started to recognize that. And it was after the fashion show in May of 2015, I graduated from Northeastern. And while graduating college is such a huge achievement and accomplishment for so many, this for me felt like the ultimate thing I would ever achieve, because after taking a medical leave and taking time off of school, as I had said, really struggling with my mental health and changing my major to go into helping others, it was a huge accomplishment, and it still is something I'm very proud of. So I graduated on a Friday, and then on that Monday, I started working at McLean. So as you know, as I've kind of talked about that experience, I had several experiences working at McLean Hospital where I was treated. And I worked on the adolescent unit that I was treated at. And at first, it was a really great experience. I felt as though it was very full circle, very important to me. And while I still am so grateful for the time that I spent working at McLean, I also realized that it probably wasn't the right setting for me, whether I was too close to it or I just didn't feel like the individual micro kind of communication was really what I needed. I looked back at my life and thought about what has been so important to me. And as I've said a few times, being an activist and work in advocacy was really huge. So I decided to go back to Northeastern to get my master's degree in public health. And I didn't even really know what public health was before hearing about this actually from my therapist in terms of what I could do in advocacy to make it my full-time job. And this change really brought on a lot of difficulties for me. Going back to school, being in that environment, in a way was something that has always been difficult, as I do value education so much. But I was able to get through, and I graduated with my master's last August. And now I work as a public health professional at an organization called Girls Inc. In Lynn, Massachusetts. And I have a great job. I love it. And while I think it's so important, the work that I do, I also feel that in addition to like my regular job duties, being an advocate and being someone that the girls can go to in terms of their questions about therapy, about mental health, about diagnoses, and also how they want to use their story has been so important and valuable. While that has nothing to do with the day-to-day work that I do, I really try to make myself an advocate in that situation, because I think that's what I would have wanted in high school, thinking about all of those years back, having someone like me. So that's really important to me. Also, as we alluded to, and this whole baking project, this book has brought me so many amazing things. So as Mr. Godbout had introduced, this is a book that's a collection of 40 stories, well, over 40 stories and recipes from people in all walks of life, all ages. I think the age range is like 15 to 80, from all over the country, sharing their own experiences. And if there's one thing that I really want to get across today and in all of my opportunities speaking, is that everyone has a story, and that matters, first of all. And second of all, what will you do with that? You could do nothing. That's okay. You can internalize your own story, and that's great. You could share it with a friend, family members, with a therapist maybe, or you can share it with your fellow students in 10 years like me, or you can write a book about it. That there is so much value to everyone's own personal narrative. That's what I'm really trying to get across in this book, but also in my opportunity to speak with you today. So I'm going to pause there and see if there are any questions. I also know I didn't cover a lot of questions that I got from the memoir class, as I was just kind of in the zone. So I can start there, if that sounds good to you. So I know talking a little bit about writing. So writing has always been really important to me. I have always wanted to be an author. I remember walking into Tatnook and Barnes & Noble in Framingham, which has been so cool because I've been able to do book signings at both now, and thinking about what I would write about. I do want to write a memoir, but I am 27, so I want to give it a few years because I think there's more that I can share. And so that's important to me. I did do a lot of journaling throughout my experience and writing through my mental health challenges, and I still do. So that's really important to me. In terms of some of the like nitty-gritty of how I got this book to be published, I worked really hard on trying to get a hybrid publishing company to sign on to this book, which essentially means that they would do everything for me, everything that a traditional publisher would do, but I would pay for the printing of the books, and that was really expensive, and I did this on absolutely no budget other than what I raised on GoFundMe. And that really wasn't an option. I didn't feel like I could take out a loan of my own, and I just really believed in this book as being built from the ground up. So it didn't feel like a good way for me to work on that. So instead, I found a graphic designer, actually through my job at Girls Inc., a friend of a friend who does a lot of artwork in Lynn, who decided to partner with me and was very reasonable in price and very reasonable in being able to make sure that this is exactly what I wanted. This book took me about 2 years to create, collect, and put it on Amazon. I've sold, I think, like 800 copies so far, which is really cool. And I can't imagine like what's next, really. So this came out in July, and now I'm trying to just go to different places to speak. My current boss asked me if like being a full-time celebrity was my dream job, and it totally is, but not really for celebrity reasons, just to get my story out there, and hopefully use food as a way to connect people, which is really the idea of this book. I'm not really a baker. I do enjoy baking, but it's definitely not my forte. Really, the mental health advocacy piece is what I love. And I decided to pair these recipes with mental health stories, or just stories that might feel really isolating, things that we think we have to deal with on our own, with food. And I did this because I feel like food's something we can all relate to, whether we have a good relationship with food or more of a negative one. Everyone needs it. And while these conversations are really easily shy-awayable, if that's a word, putting them together is a way to create this conversation that I think we talk a lot about in the mental health space, but I'm not sure how we can do that other than through storytelling. So I think I hit everything. Does anyone else have any questions? Yeah.
How did did you collect the 40 stories?
Okay, so the question was, how did I collect the 40 stories? So I think just over time, throughout my personal networks, whether it was people that I was in treatment with or people who've really influenced my life in some way. The first chapter is just like interviews with people that I did, and some are more narrative based. Social media was huge in finding people who wanted to share their stories. And I felt that once I gave people the opportunity to share, they really welcomed it. Some people, I know it isn't as easy for them to share, but I felt like if I was able to maybe start that process, they would feel more comfortable. That's a good question. Yeah.
Thinking back to 10 years ago, would you ever put yourself here in the front of the room?
Oh no, definitely not. Well, I think I've always I did theater from birth through high school. So I always really loved being on stage, but I don't think in high school I even really knew what social work, what a social work major would look like, even though I ended up graduating with a human services and psychology major, but I didn't even think that, I don't think I really knew what mental health was. I know that sounds so simple, but I had really felt that I had these things under control. I didn't even think that there was anything wrong with how I was feeling because I felt that way my whole life. So I can't believe that I'm here being able to share what I've gone through. It's always a very humbling experience to kind of hear my story back because I lived through it and I think about it all the time. So being able to share and think about how far I've come is huge. So I always really appreciate that opportunity. So maybe speaking, yes, I think that would be really cool. But about this, absolutely not. And also about baking, I'm not a good cook at all. So this is definitely huge. That's a great question. Thank you. Yeah?
My annual apology to you. Yeah, I had Dayna class for AP psychology and completely missed the struggles and that she was going through every day. Just missed it. I apologize again.
Okay.
The 10, 15 teachers in the room, maybe even the kids, what should we be looking for?
Mm-hmm.
When a kid isn't at the point yet where they can ask for help, or maybe how can some of the kids who care about their friends, what should they be looking for?
Yeah, I'm glad that you ask that every time I come back. I think for me it's difficult because I don't really think that I knew what I needed or wanted, so that's always kind of a challenging question for me to answer, what would I have wanted? I think just someone to talk to, I think is really huge. I think everyone can benefit from talking to a third party, whether it's someone like a therapist, someone clinical, but also maybe just a teacher or a friend. I think that providing resources is really important. I also wonder if I had known about maybe someone I could talk to here or someone in the community if I would have thought that maybe that could have been a benefit to me. So really making resources more readily available and known. In this book, I actually talk about, I have several resource pages, and one of the first ones is talking about what to expect when you call a hotline or text a crisis line, because I think that's something that we tell people a lot, that there is help and you can get it through these resources, but what does that actually look like? I feel is really important to think about. So I guess that would be one part of the answer that I have to your question. But I also think in terms of just friends, I found it really helpful in my life to share a little bit about what I'm going through. I feel that really opens the door for the other person to share. I think no one wants to be the first person, but if you are brave enough and want to ask someone how they're really doing and maybe share something that you're noticing or something that you've gone through, I think that can really open the door to something great. Or at least that's been my experience. Thank you. Yeah.
So back to writing, the members of reading and writing memoir class here. And one of the issues that we discussed is how people are brave enough to write about painful issues and where to draw the line with those painful issues in terms of how much of your personal experiences can you disclose, and also if you are perhaps exposing some elements of your family life or people around you that might be affected by what you are saying or
Yeah.
right are saying. So can you talk a little bit about just some of those decisions that you or other people who wrote for you had to make?
Yeah.
in the decision?
Okay, that's a great question. I think that a lot of people worry, especially around like Google now, because I Google myself all the time to see like what comes up. So I think being this self-proclaimed mental health activist and advocate, to me it was a little bit, I felt like I had already shared enough. I did make a documentary, sorry, I meant to say that, about my experience abroad and my healing from sexual violence. So I kind of already put some of this stuff out there, but I think for some other people in the book, I think it ranged from using different names to writing things anonymously, because that is such a huge part of the process. And I think that there are elements of my story that I don't necessarily share yet. Maybe I allude to, but I need a little bit more time to process them. And I think where to draw the line is a really good question, because I think that when I experience something, I always feel ready to share it, to write about it, but I don't always have the most clarity around those issues because I might have just lived through them. So I think being able to process it is huge, and I think that it was really important to me in this process. And the rewriting process was really important to me. Having people that didn't really know me read the letter from the author that I wrote was really important, in addition to the people who did know me well. And I think I've only really had positive, so far, knock on wood, like experiences with sharing. I think that, as I was saying before, I think people want to be heard. I think that it's just really hard to be the first person to do that. But I think in the memoir that I might write in the next like 5 years or something, there will be parts that will be a little bit more difficult for me to expand on. And I've actually been thinking about that a lot. I guess I'm never too young to write a memoir, but I feel like I need a little bit more life experience. Maybe not, I don't know. Yeah, and looking at people who've written memoirs that really inspire me, I think was really huge too. I know what I'm gonna name my next book. It's gonna be 351 degrees, because 350 degrees is like the perfect baking temperature, but I've been told I'm very extra, so +1. So that's the name of mine. Actually, that's the necklace I'm wearing right now. Well, I won't mess up the mic, but that's my next book. Not sure what's gonna be in it, but that's what it's gonna be called. Yes. Oh, sure. Yeah, that's a great idea. So I'm gonna not read my letter from the author because I basically just shared a lot of that. But let me see what I can share. I have some ideas. So the book is in different parts, as I said. So some are interview questions, others people wrote personal narratives. There's a chapter about the art of baking, which is great. I think how baking has helped others. And all right, I found something good. Okay, and others are narratives that people just wanted to share. So also something that was really important to me in the chapters that talked about some difficult subjects, I had like a content warning. That was something that I thought about a lot because I wanted to make sure that people were really okay when they started to read it, and whether you need it or not, like that's okay. But for those who might need to see it, I thought that was important. Okay, so I'm going to read one about addiction. So this person submitted like a lemon loaf here, and this is their story. Okay, my name is Ariel, and my life is beautiful. I'm 30 years old and reside in Salem, Massachusetts. I'm a dog mom, a daughter, a fiance, and a friend. I work for an amazing company where I get to help people better their lives every day. I'm a student and an intern. There is another part of me, though, a very important part. I'm a recovering addict. My life didn't always consist of love, hope, hard work, and learning. It was once dark and horrific. I would definitely say that I was born with the disease of addiction. A powerful force inside my soul constantly needed to be fed by outside things to make me feel better. From as far back as I can remember, my inner voice screamed at me, I'm not good enough, I'm worthless, no one loves me, and I believed it all, as if these phrases were simple facts like an apple is fruit. While all this occurred internally, externally, my childhood was wonderful. I had 2 loving parents, a beautiful home to live in, plenty of food to eat, and the list goes on. All of the cards I was dealt in life could have led me to succeed, but none of that mattered. My addictions and obsessions started with small and innocent things. Beanie Babies, Pokemon cards. As I got older, my internal pain and self-hatred got worse. So did my addictions and my demons. I turned to food for comfort. I gained a lot of weight and struggled with an eating disorder. I latched onto people in a codependent manner to validate me in ways I couldn't validate myself. Eventually, the ways in which I tried to make myself feel better no longer worked. It was in high school that I first tried alcohol. It was the first time I was finally able to quiet the nasty inner voice. I had fun. I felt like I fit in. I could laugh, be silly, let loose, and not have my mind running a mile a minute. Little did I know my solution to feeling better at the time was the beginning of the end. Just like before, this temporary fix no longer worked, and my disease progressed to the depths of hell, swallowing me whole. In time, I became an IV drug user. I lost everything that mattered to me. The drugs took my soul. They took everything. I'm so thankful that I got to the point where I was so broken and lost and desperate to find a new way to live that I got help. I found that I wasn't alone. I found that there were other people like me who had been where I had been and had found a solution. I've been clean and sober since January 24th, 2017. I'm grateful for everything I've been through in my life because it has made me the person I am today. I think that's a really good example of someone using their story as fuel for the conversation around addiction and mental health, and just the honesty I think is really important too. And yeah, she paired it with that recipe, so that's really important. So thank you for asking. That's a great question. Anyone else have anything they want to ask? We have like 10 minutes, maybe? I'm gonna look for another one while I do. Oh yes, hi, sorry.
Do you have any advice for like our seniors that are heading off to higher ed?
Yeah, definitely. So a few things, I guess. So
This community heading someplace where they might not have maybe connections yet, or
yeah, well, the first thing I want to say is that the college process is so hard. Oh my gosh. So I work at Girls Inc., as I said, and I'm a senior mentor, which means I'm one-on-one paired with a girl who is applying to college. And just the process is just so difficult and harder than I remember, I think. So I commend you all for going through that because that's really hard, but totally worth it. In terms of what happens when you may choose to go to college, I think that knowing, as I said a little bit before, the resources is really important, knowing where the counseling center is, even if you think you'll never use it, maybe a friend, knowing what's offered. And there are also a lot of organizations now that are centered around mental health and just wellness. There's a lot of opportunities to get involved as maybe a peer leader. There's also this organization called Active Minds, which is on most college campuses. I started at Northeastern, so if you end up going there, that's a product of me, which is really cool. I didn't start the full organization, but I started the chapter there. And essentially, that is an organization focused on advocacy. They do this really important project called Send Silence Packing, where they do this like art installation of all these backpacks of people who've lost their life to suicide. So there are a lot of ways to get involved, whether it's getting help, knowing the resources for yourself or a friend, or being involved in more of this advocacy work, because we need more people speaking about these issues. I think we've come a long way in destigmatizing mental illness and the idea behind mental health, but I think we also have a long way to go. So we definitely need some more future leaders because that's really important. And in my opinion, the best way to destigmatize these issues is by sharing stories, obviously. I spent a lot of time on this book, but I really think that maybe you wouldn't look at me and think that about all that I have been through. But now that you know that, and you know that I'm just like a normal looking person, that I live with that. So you never know who else does. And I think that's really important. And another piece of my story that I want to leave you with is just that I still struggle. I get nervous sometimes, and I might need to go back to treatment or need some more help someday. But that's okay. I really think that that's important part of my story, that I still live with these issues. And while I have so many skills now and a lot of many opportunities to get help, I know where the resources are. I have a great therapist and psychiatrist that I see. I still struggle. I think that's important. I think a lot of times we think, as I thought so many years ago, that once you go to treatment or once you work on it for a little while, that's it. It's like a one and done thing. But it's not. It's evolving. I'm still evolving. And I think that's important too. Yeah. That might be a good way. Okay, yeah.
Since you graduated in 2010,
Yes.
I think there's been a major shift
for awareness
Yes.
around mental health.
Totally, I think so. Yeah. I think there's more. We see more representation in media now. I think there's the opportunity to share a little bit more is there in terms of like being able to share on social media in a positive way. I try to use mine for that. So I definitely think that things have shifted. I think a lot of celebrities being able to sharing their experiences, starting organizations, has also been really huge. And I'm really encouraged because who knows what like the next 10 years will be. I think there's always going to be a little bit of work to do because it is something that's so scary for so many people, but we're definitely moving in the right direction. So I'm glad that you pointed that out because sometimes the fight can feel like frustrating, but there really has been so much shift and change. And I think also educating some of like the older generations is really important because I think that as we all get older, and I think we're the most accepting we've ever been. So I think like educating your parents or other people in your life about these issues is really important too. Or at least that's been my experience with my family. Not so much my parents, but like other family members who might not understand or might not know what to say or how to support someone. Yeah. Yes, that's a great question. I love reading my book. I think that so actually in the letter that I write, I wrote about how the book has brought me such great company, that learning and what vulnerability means to other people has been so huge for me. And sometimes if I'm just feeling down, I love to read it. I feel like sometimes that feels a little like self-involved, but it helps me. It's definitely a coping skill. And I was trying to make all the recipes in this book. I got to like 2, so maybe I should restart that journey, I guess. But yeah, definitely. And I love that this can help me as much as I hope it helps someone else. I also was really lucky to work with an advocacy organization at Northeastern called Acting Out, and they do theater, like activism theater, and they picked 5 stories from this and put it on stage, which was so cool. That was like such a great experience. So hopefully I can bring that to other places as well. I think that would be huge. Other schools, they did use all real food in the show though. I feel like that might be a little bit complicated. But yeah, if I could continue that would be huge too. So yeah, great question, thank you. I love being able to turn to it for support. And I'm hoping that there's another one, whether it's my memoir or like Bake It Till You Make It holiday season, because the holidays are really hard for people and there are a lot of good holiday recipes. So that's really important. And I'm also trying to roll out some like ideas, some educational like merch, I guess. I don't know, that sounds like really lame, like educational merch. I don't know. So I'm thinking about like dish towels that have like Bake It Till You Make It on it, but on the tag it has like different resources. I'm like doing some DIY coasters right now with different like self-care tips and information. So the goal is to make it accessible, but also educational. I think that's really important to me. It's the whole point of this. So, yeah. Okay. I'm not missing anyone else?
On a different subject.
Yeah.
You're a tour de force, public speaking.
Yeah.
People to watch you, but sometimes it's a struggle for kids to share about silly weapons in World War I. So what you're sharing is your personal story and your struggle and how you overcame it. How did you gain such confidence and such a gifted public speaker?
I think practice has been huge. Practice, and I have a really long drive. I live on the South Shore and I work on the North Shore, so every day when I drive, I just like talk to my windshield and practice. It's been like this beautiful gift of the worst commute ever. So that's been really helpful. Yeah, practice, getting comfortable and feeling confident in my own story. And I always get nervous, always. But then once I start talking, I'm like, this is my story. I know how that works. And I also think that when I watch other speakers, I know it can be a little bit uncomfortable being in the audience when someone looks really nervous. So I always try and think about that in my audience. I always worry. My biggest fear is that I'm going to bore an audience. So I also think about like if you're bored, like that's okay. Like you've been bored before. I always think that in my mind. Like you'll sit through it. Like it's okay. You'll be fine. I hope that's not the case, but that helps. Like thinking about those fears really helps too. So that's a really good question. And it's been becoming here every year. I think I notice like how different things are for me and being able to practice the ways that I have. I did this on a really large scale at this like beautiful test kitchen. I think that was like the most nervous I've been lately because I'm not a cook or a baker. So having people watch me crack eggs, I was like, can someone do it for me? My hands are shaking. So using like maybe some laughter too, just being honest and authentic with the audience is really important. But yeah, that's the hardest thing I've done so far. And I can remember when I did theater in high school, someone saying, like I went to this theater camp and someone was saying that like when you're on Broadway, nothing changes. I mean, obviously you're on Broadway, but like all the work that you've put in beforehand is really what gets you there. And just being on that stage, you've already done the work. So I like to think of this as practice for like when I'm on Rachel Ray or like sitting with Ellen or something like that. But it's huge because being able to just like touch one person, I think that's really all that I want. It's not about being a celebrity, as I said earlier. It's about being able to share my story in the best way that I can. So that's huge. Yeah.
How did you start with a YouTube channel?
Oh, that's a great question. Yes. So that's actually where I was going to try every recipe in my book for a YouTube channel. It's been a little bit challenging. I don't really know anything about like filming, so I've just been trying to do it on my phone, but I think that would be a really good idea. And I love this being filmed today. Like, hopefully, thank you, Dayna, another Dayna. Hopefully I can use that too as like, start this reel, I guess, just the beginning. But thank you, that's a great suggestion. Maybe I should go back to that. Okay, I think, oh, I do.
How does your recipe finish up?
Oh, so you put it in the oven. So you use 325. You mix it up. I don't have enough evaporated milk in here, so it's like really smooth. And then you put it in the oven for 25 minutes. And they're so good. They're really hard to cut, but this is like a recipe that my family has been in my family like for as long as I can remember at every holiday, graham cracker brownies. And it's so easy. Oh my gosh, 3 ingredients. And you can eat the batter because like there's no eggs in it, but I'm not going to advise that because I don't think the proportions are right today. As far as just a prop. Yeah, so that's a really good piece of it too. So yeah, I think that's like right on time, right? Yeah, okay. Thank you all so much. Thank you.